Leviticus 002. Chapter 6. This chapter deals with the sins that have been committed to require these offerings: the burnt offering, the grain offering, and sin offering. Chapter 7. This chapter deals with sins needing guilt and fellowship offerings. The guilt offering, or fellowship offering, has to do with desiring to give thanks. Leviticus 3:12. And the eating of fat and blood is forbidden. The priest's share, or how much of any offering a priest can take home for a meal, this is how God fed the Levites, since the Levites were to take care of the temple, and cattle and seed were not on their daily to-dos. Chapter 8, the ordination of Aaron and sons. Chapter 9, the priests begin their ministry. At verses 23 and 24, all the sacrifices were accepted by the Lord, and fire came out of the tabernacle and consumed the sacrifices. This is an especially exciting time for the people, because this was showing God's approval of them. It is my request that you read chapter 9 through so you can see firsthand the sadness on what I'm about to talk about. Squirrel. Many churches, and in fact many people of today, believe that they can worship God in a way befitting whatever they, the people, come up with. God is an extremely patient God, and has and will put up with an extreme amount of what people, even today, do when it comes to worshiping God. But when it came back to the very beginning of what God had tried to establish, if the people didn't do as God said, as God had told them to do, God had no time to play, and what God had to say, as far as the law and the commandments, were not to be toyed with. This is why chapter 11 is the I told you so chapter. Next, we deal with Nadab and Abihu and the importance of doing as God has prescribed. Nadab and Abihu were Aaron's sons, anointed as priests who didn't earn their positions. They inherited them. What is the difference, you ask? A man works all his days to buy a certain type of car, and he treats that car with extreme TLC to make it last as long as possible. One day his son gets old enough to drive, and with pride his dad hands him the keys to that car, which is in such pristine condition. His son, which has no respect for the car and only knows how fast it can go and how it will look to the chicks, gladly shows off in front of others, and, not understanding the power that he has in his possession, loses more than just control of the car, but loses his life as well. This is what happened in chapter 10 with Nadab and Abihu. Neither one of these young priests had an actual caring of their position as priests. What they had was an inherited position. When it came to the fire in their censers, instead of going through the process of taking the necessary trip to light their censers in the flame that was set for that reason, they lit them in the closest fire available. God had a reason for the fire being lit from the true source, rather than just any source, and didn't appreciate at all what these young men had done. Could it have been upbringing or improper teaching that caused this? Not sure. What is sure is that this is proof God was not playing around. God knew it was profane fire, and God sent down a fire that consumed both of them. Aaron had nothing to say. 10:3. Moses called on Moses' cousins, Michael and Elzaphan, to take their cousins, he actually meant second cousins, out of the tabernacle. 10:4. Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, were to take over. The priest the rest of the chapter had to do with what they were authorized to eat, being priests. Squirrel. Since there was no FDA or other information available on how to keep meat fresh and sanitary, there were a lot of laws that had to do with animals that were considered clean and unclean, mainly due to the fact that the way we handle meat today keeps issues like that from happening now. Another thing to remember is that, again, this is God speaking to them, not to you or I. A lot of what was brought up, we don't eat anyway. Back to the issues at hand. Chapter 12 had to do with childbirth and circumcision. Chapter 13 is about skin diseases and defiling molds. An interesting read, but some won't care to hear about it. Chapter 14 is about defiling and cleansing of skin diseases. Chapter 15 is about discharges. Chapter 16 is about the Day of Atonement. It speaks a lot of the day of the Sabbath day and to honor it. Chapter 17 is about eating blood, since blood is the keystone of life. Chapter 18 is about unlawful sexual relations. Now, this subject is handled rather carefully. Basically, anyone in the family tree other than your spouse. This includes step or half relations. This is still part of the family tree. 1817 steps outside the family tree to stay away from your neighbors. 1820, your neighbor's family. Next, we will deal with the subjects that need a time slot, if you will, of their own. It should be rather interesting. Next time, I know this is one that is rather short, but it is worth waiting on the next one. Thank you.